Hi, I am Liz Powell. I am the founder and head of G2G Consulting, and I get to kick things off today and then pass to my esteemed colleagues to share our insights on navigating MHSRS and Department of Defense and funding opportunities overall with the military. So what I'll do is I'll start off with a little bit of background and then I'll pass to my colleagues. So next slide, please. So this is what we're going to cover today. We'll start off with a little bit of an introduction on G2G. I know some of you know us well, but some of you do not. So we want to make sure we start that off. Then we'll shift to covering government funding sources, so you understand where there are all these resources for you. We'll talk about grant tracking on our specific Government Bioscience Grants Report, or GBG reporting service. The military health system, how it is set up, as well as the VA and key opportunities within that, areas of focus. The conference overall, so MHSRS is coming up in August, and that is a phenomenal networking opportunity and chance to learn about all the priorities within DoD right now. So we definitely are going to go into a lot of detail on how that conference works. And then we're going to hear from an expert, a serial entrepreneur, a real leader in the life sciences who runs a couple of different companies, but one in particular is Tiga Therapeutics. He also runs Biocom California, serves as the president, and is just an amazing pioneer in the life sciences. So he's going to share his experience in working with DoD. And we'll close out with questions. So please post your questions in the Q&A box. The chat box is not open for everyone to comment, so use that Q&A box. And then final takeaways. So that's us. So I think we can do the next slide. All right, so the background. So G2G is a bipartisan team, started in 2007, and since then we've raised over $500 million in non-dilutive funding. And we've also done CMS reimbursement, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. We've worked on different regulations, drafted legislation, led advocacy campaigns, relationship development. So we do a lot with Capitol Hill, with the agencies, and the White House. So across the board, we are always trying to navigate government and make connections and advance opportunities to facilitate strategic growth for our companies and our nonprofits. We work with institutions, nonprofits, and companies. I'd say our niche is definitely life sciences. From day one when I started the business, that was a big focus. My background, I worked on Capitol Hill as a legislative director and worked in a lot of health policy. And I also staffed the Armed Services Committee. So I learned all the different funding streams and how so many of the health policies we see in the civilian world are actually in the military world as well. And most of our innovation actually at some point has come from the military. So it is just a great resource for the life sciences. So that's definitely a big niche for us. The monthly GBG report that I mentioned is definitely our unique service that we offer for many of the bio chapters and then individual companies. And women's health, we've really taken a lead role. I was there for the White House initiative on women's health research announcement of the $12 billion. I was there with the ARPA-H $100 million announcement. So I've been able to be very involved with that whole effort, and we're seeing new funding opportunities and some shifting around FDA approval and CMS reimbursement that hopefully will be helpful, open some doors for women's health. Our locations, you can see we're located in a few different places. I actually started the business out of Cleveland, so my heart is always there, but I'm from Boston, and I live in Virginia, so we cover a lot of different areas. We've also done a lot in Pittsburgh over the years. We're doing more in California, so we are a lot of different places and care about life sciences across the country and making these connections to the military no matter where you are. And we also work with companies that are outside the United States. So in case there's any of those folks on the line, there's opportunities for you too. And then final box here is the list of our affiliates. So we work with a lot of different bio chapters, as I mentioned. We have a whole Midwest bio consortium we're working with. We've got Virginia Bio, so a lot of different bio organizations. North Carolina Biotech actually was just down at the Research Triangle speaking at their Warfighter Conference on many of the issues we're talking about today. We work with Women in Defense, a lot of these different defense health consortium efforts, trying to advance more research funding for military medical. And something we'll touch on today is that there's all these research lines for medical research within Department of Defense. And we are regularly talking to Congress to increase those lines to keep them going. And we're going to close out with a great case study about how we actually created a whole new line that didn't even exist before with that advocacy. So always want to emphasize the importance of advocacy and relationship development when you're going after government funding. So I think that covers that slide. So we can go to the next slide. This is just a disclaimer about us as speakers today, that there's no conflict whatsoever, and we also are not speaking for Department of Defense. We're just trying to provide helpful information. And so with that, I will pass it to my colleague, Greg Kapkar.
Hi, thanks a lot, Liz. I'm Greg Kapkar. I am actually headquartered in our Midwest office here in Cleveland. And as Liz mentioned, she's in DC. I've been with G2G for over 7 years now, and work primarily in our bioscience, life sciences practice, working with companies like many of you on the phone today, helping to connect to Department of Defense and other government entities, and have the pleasure of working with Liz and Aditya and Heather and many others on our team in this space, and then just kind of across federal and state work. So we can go to the next slide, and wanted to spend a little bit of time on the government funding sources. Liz mentioned the different categories about getting language or funding written into legislation and the appropriations process. And we do trainings and webinars entirely on that. So there might be some crossover into some of our discussion today around that, but we're going to primarily focus on the DoD access and specifically the big military health system research symposium that's coming up. But I did want to spend a little bit of time on the categories that you see here. Aside from just grants, there are the 3 other categories, and specifically around legislation, there are ways for companies to get written into report language, either for funding or policy issues. When it comes to discretionary funding, oftentimes when departments, agencies are nearing the end of their fiscal year, there is some leftover money that needs to be spent. So as we build relationships with the program managers and they know who you are and what your company does, there are opportunities to position yourself for the potential of getting this discretionary funding. And then there are other end of year opportunities. And Liz, I just totally drew a blank on the congressional holdovers. Help me come up with that term. I just totally blanked on it.
Restoral funding.
Restoral funding, yes. So that is a term to get familiar with as you're working with the DoD, because they can do this restoral funding as it relates to congressional appropriations and such. And then, of course, there's the procurement side of things, where if you've got a particular product that you're trying to sell to the government, this is where they're going to actually buy directly from you. And there's a whole process related to that, but we're not going to necessarily focus there. So just kind of shifting gears here, staying on this slide, looking at the table and the pie chart. Why is this important? So many companies in the life sciences and biotech space come to us with a lot of knowledge about NIH and NSF, and those are often the go-to sources for funding for life sciences. And just look kind of where their level of funding is over the years. We've got this chart out from going back all the way from fiscal year 22 to 25, seeing that Department of Defense leads the pack here with their total budget allocation. Now, some of that is already spoken for in terms of bases and purchasing weapons and things like that. But there is a strong medical research and development command that pulls in about $1 billion into centers of excellence and other entities that have their own budgets to solve particular problems relevant to the DoD. So a takeaway from this slide and this entire time that we're spending together today is, if you haven't thought about working with the DoD, now is a good time. And we'll lay out pathways throughout the course of today as to how you can do that. But wanted to mention that on the research side of the Department of Defense, if you can find a military application, a medical military application in many cases, for what you're working on, there are many opportunities. And what guides the flow of money are requirements that the DoD sets out. And these are actual official decisions, which are priorities or gaps or needs and things that need to be funded. And we're going to talk a little bit about where those funding streams are, and how the Military Health Conference is an avenue to get your foot in the door, to talk with those who are managing these portfolios and this funding stream. So figuring out where your company can help fill the military gaps, especially around medical innovations, is key. The other thing to keep in mind when working with the Department of Defense is they are not going to be the sole source of funding for an organization. So if you come to them and your only customer is going to be the DoD, that it's going to be a tough road for you. They want to see a dual purpose in technologies that they bring forward. So it's got to have a military application and also a civilian application. So something to keep in mind as you're considering potentially working with the DoD. So we can go to the next slide. Liz mentioned our grant tracking service. It is officially called the Government Bioscience Grants Report, or Reporting Services. And there's some information here that we will actually share these slides later on after the presentation, but I want to highlight a few things. So our GBG report is a compilation of monthly opportunities in the bioscience, high-tech, life sciences space that is curated from our team of grant trackers from multiple sources. And we provide this report to companies that we work with as clients, but it's also available if companies want to buy it or purchase it just on a 1 month or a yearly basis. And essentially, we curate this information, we compile it into one source each month, and it comes with the title and the opportunity number. It's focused on recently released opportunities, as well as we'll flag opportunities that are pre-announcements or pre-solicitations or forecasts. And then we provide a short description, the deadlines, what's the pay line, what's the funding, and then a link to actually get to that announcement in case you're interested in making an application. Separately from this webinar that we do now, related to the Government Bioscience Grants Report, we do a free webinar every third Thursday of the month at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And for 30 minutes, we highlight what's in that current report. And Aditya, who you will hear from soon, leads that discussion. And then at the bottom of the hour, for another 30 minutes, there's a private consultation session for anybody who is actually signed up for the service or is a client. We can go to the next slide. And I just want to mention, Liz talked about that there are several bio chapter organizations that we work with. And here is a representation of all of them. These are the bio chapters and affiliates that provide the GBG reporting service as a member benefit. So if you are a member of any of these organizations, Bio Nebraska, Bio Utah, Focused Ultrasound Foundation, Illinois Bio, Indiana Health Industry Forum, Iowa Bio, Mich Bio, North Carolina Biotech, Ohio Life Sciences, South Dakota Biotech, and Virginia Bio. If you're not aware of it already, the GBG report and that private consultation every month is available to you as part of your membership in those organizations. Okay, so I will, let's go to the next slide. All right, as we transition over into the military health system and teeing this up for the discussion about the health conference coming up in August. Just want to turn to this slide. It helps set the scope and breadth of the military health system and Veterans Affairs. So the military health system is part of DoD. The VA is a separate department. There are over 9 million beneficiaries in the military health system, and the military health system has its own system of hospitals, medical clinics, and the same with the Veterans Affairs. It has 23 veterans integrated service networks, clinics, and nursing homes. So some key areas of interest for the military health system and VA are listed here, and we'll go into more of those as we talk about the conference coming up. So this is not an exhaustive list by any means on this slide, but it does give you some idea of the different topics as far as wound healing, regenerative medicine, other terms that you will hear often associated with military health system care will be combat casualty care, point of injury care, en route care. So wherever technologies can fit along that continuum in the different roles of care within the military are opportunities for companies like yours if you've got technology innovations in this particular space. So with that, I think I am done, and we'll pass it. We can go to the next slide, and Aditya, I think you take it from here.
Thanks so much, Greg. Hi, everyone. My name is Aditya. I've been with G2G for 2 years and have the pleasure of working with Greg and Liz and Heather on our biosciences team. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about the conference that we've been alluding to from the very start. So this is the Military Health System Research Symposium, or MHSRS. And as has been mentioned earlier, this is the largest military medical conference of the year. It lasts 4 days and will be held at the end of August this year, from August 26th to 29th at the Gaylord Palms Resort and Convention Center in Kissimmee, Florida. In terms of an attendance profile, this meeting is well attended by folks from various quarters, including affiliates of industry, academia, clinicians and researchers affiliated with the DoD, Department Healthcare Leadership, DoD program managers, as well as affiliates of Veterans Affairs and other agencies. And just to give you a scope of how big this meeting is, last year about 3,800 people attended. In terms of topic areas and scope, and so the conference every year is divided into 4 really broad topic areas. They're not explicitly listed here, but they are warfighter medical readiness, expeditionary medicine, warfighter performance, and return to duty. I understand that some of that might sound like a foreign language to some of you, but what would probably make more sense is the focus areas of the 60+ breakout sessions of the conference, most of which are closely linked to scientific and clinical areas where the military has specific medical requirements, as Greg alluded to earlier. And examples of this, again, this list is not exhaustive, but they include things like, infectious disease, medical AI, injury prevention, pain management, hemorrhage control, and in line with broader priorities in the federal government, women's health as well. And so while this conference is sponsored by the military, it still is by definition and classification still a scientific conference. And so your standard themes for more conventional meetings still apply. So that includes breakout sessions comprising of both podium and poster presentations. There's also a large exhibit hall where vendors can highlight their products and services. G2G had our own booth last year, and it was a good success, and we plan on doing so again this year as well. There are benefits of attendance at this conference, even if your particular innovation or your particular work or research or product don't necessarily align precisely with any of the breakout sessions. And so one of the big parts of this is the insights that you get from high-level DoD health and medical leaders at the plenary session. It's a really good way to understand where the defense health agencies are moving towards, what their new and emerging priorities are, but also what their previous priorities, which ones are continuing, and in some cases, which priorities are being downplayed or even in some cases abandoned. And so having that knowledge from the decision makers firsthand can really help you frame your work or talk about your work in a way that it's better aligned with those military priorities and set you up for success. And that opportunity to directly interact with those high-level DoD affiliates cannot be overstated. A lot of those folks are really, really difficult to get a hold of otherwise. And this is one of the few places, one of the few meetings where all these people are, convening in one place. And so you really get to get an opportunity that's unparalleled in that respect. But even outside of those really high-level DoD affiliates, it's really, really a great unparalleled opportunity to network with people who are affiliated with the DoD health and medical complex, who are, scattered throughout the country. Even folks who don't necessarily have a fancy title, but could be immensely helpful. More often than not, you at this conference, when you're, not in a breakout session, you're talking with people in the hallway. You strike up a conversation with someone, and even if they themselves are not able to help you or are not doing work that's exactly relevant to you, the chances are very, very high that he or she knows half a dozen other people in their network who are in the DoD health system, who are not public facing or not well known, but who could be a good connection for you. And so that's the key, networking and meeting people who you otherwise would not be able to interact with because they all come to this meeting. I will also say that there's various receptions that are held on site at the conference. A lot of them are at the conference center and sponsored by DoD affiliate consortia. And those are also really great forums that are well attended and help foster those types of discussions. And lastly, rounding out, in terms of, it might sound basic, but just getting exposure to the system is a major plus from just being at this conference. The system can be a little bit overwhelming, but you have to start somewhere. And this is a really, really great place to start. The downstream rewards from, putting that investment in and building towards, slowly but surely engaging the military and DoD, the downstream rewards can be manifold. It takes time, and having multiple touch points with the military and the right folks in the complex is important. But this is a great place to start, and something that G2G attends every single year, and we really highly recommend it to all folks we work with who are interested in working with DoD. Go to the next slide. I'm not going to dwell too much on this, but we are a little over 2 months out, and it's really the ideal time to start preparing to make the most of the conference. So when you attend, you know what you're doing, and you're not lost once you're there. And so after some delay, information about particulars, including dates, venue, and breakout sessions and organization and itinerary have just very recently been released. I think it was literally just a week and a half ago or so. I will say that registration for the meeting is actually not open until early July. Again, that's a little later than what you might expect for a conventional conference, but given that this is sponsored by a government entity and there's a lot of specific requirements they need to meet, additional scrutiny they face, there's reasons for that delay. But in any case, you should logistically be aware that, again, the registration for the meeting will open in early July. And concurrently, booking a hotel room at the Gaylord where the conference is being held will open concurrently. I will say that with registration, those rooms do go fast, although there are numerous other venues or hotels where you can stay at, and many people do. In any case, a lot of the information has been posted on the website, and we can share that in the chat and afterwards as well. So moving on, now we're going to transition into our discussion with our guest, with Tim Scott. So this is going to be highlighting Tim's company's experience in engaging with the DoD, including MHSRS. Tim Scott is the CEO and co-founder of Tiga Therapeutics, a company that's based out in San Diego. His company was selected to present at the conference 2 years back, and it was a really great experience for them, and really helped potentiate a lot of the connections that we've been building for them at DoD. Just for some background, Tim has over 20 years of leadership experience at various life science companies, including current roles at Austin PX, Avelis, and DTX Pharma, to name a few. As was alluded to before, he's the current board chair of Biocom California, which is the main life sciences organization in the state, and is also the incoming president and CEO of that organization. So now we're just going to transition into a Q&A. And so Tim, if you want to come on the screen, we can do that.
Hi, Aditya.
Hi, team. Hi, Tim. How are you?
Good.
Let's start from the very beginning, shall we? Can you tell us a little bit more about, your background, about TIGA's background, what your company does for the edification of our audience?
Sure. Yeah, I'll describe the technology and maybe talk a little bit about our funding challenges, which a lot of biotechs have, and how we then were introduced to G2G and they helped us navigate this labyrinth of different government agencies and in particular the DoD. The technology that TIGA has, we discovered in 2014 that there was a real need for quality heparin sulfates. Heparin sulfate is a glycan that's implicated in lots of different diseases and cellular interactions. We had a lot of researchers that we were working with in my experience at UC San Diego that had told us that they wanted a better source because the current source for heparin sulfate is from animals, a pig source. So we had a number of programs that we were playing with, and this was one that was kind of going on in the background. And we were successfully producing different types of heparin sulfates, all biologically relevant, that researchers were starting to utilize around the world. So that program was a pretty successful program from collaborative perspectives. And then someone said, well, you should be working with the most important heparin sulfate, which is the anticoagulant heparin. And we took a look at heparin and we said, what is it going to take for us to be able to recombinantly produce heparin? Because it's not a protein that you can recombinantly produce and just knock in the gene. It's a glycan, which is the sugar that coats the protein that's been produced. And so we had to figure out how to knock in all the right enzymes to be able to allow a protein going through the Golgi apparatus and then the plasmic reticulum to get the exact right glycosylation that would create heparin attached to that protein. And after about 4 years of work, we were successful in doing that. We thought this was a monumental achievement. We were taking an animal-sourced drug that's a critical drug on the list, on WHO's list of critical drugs, and we were able to produce it recombinantly. We immediately published a paper and went out to the venture capital community, as a lot of folks on the line do when they have a discovery like that. And we went to raise money, and the pitch fell flat with a lot of the venture capitalists out there because they said, look, this is a really incredible thing that you've done, but heparin costs 48 cents per milligram. You're producing it recombinantly, which is going to be more expensive, and at the best, you're going to be able to get down to maybe 10x the cost. We think that there was some value in still pursuing that, but it wasn't going to be with venture capital money. And so we then started looking at where else we could find funding for this. We're very good at SBIR and STTR funding, whether it's through NIH or NHS, and we've been successful in generating $3 to $4 million worth of that type of funding. But this was a different type of funding that we were looking for. Well, as it turns out, the government is quite interested in heparin because it's a drug that's dosed 300,000 times a day in hospitals in the United States. But 80% of the heparin supply comes from China. And that's because 750 million pigs are sacrificed in China each year because they eat a lot of pork, but also they utilize that to make heparin and heparin sulfates that they sell to the world. And so the government became very interested in this. When we approached G2G, we explained the situation. They said, we're going to plug you into a whole host of different areas that we can talk to. And those included BARDA, DoD, ARPA-H. We also did some significant work with congressional budgeting. We've pitched over 50 Senate and congressional offices, and everybody was incredibly positive about it. But we still needed to find that source of funding within the government. We participated in the MHSRS program. We presented a poster there. There was interest from the DoD. We had multiple folks that were interested in helping us, but in particular, one person that we got introduced to by Liz took us to BioMaid and BioFab, which are two agencies within the government that are focused on reshoring drug manufacturing. And we were not only wanting to reshore drug manufacturing, but we were wanting to change it from an animal source to a recombinant source. And so the long and short of it is, after a couple of years of working very hard at this, we now have a $2 million grant for scaling up our recombinant heparin. And we would not have been able to get there without the support of the team at G2G. And I must say that we're also kind of still pursuing the congressional budgeting. We were in the 2023 omnibus with appropriations language in 4 different places, and that's not insignificant. And we're continuing to pursue that to look for additional funding. So I'll pause there and see if you have any questions, Aditya.
No, I wanted to.
I'd love to chime in actually on that, because thank you for that description. But I wanted to add the MHSRS part of it, because Tim, I remember your colleagues coming with us to MHSRS and us sitting down with this key leader who ended up transitioning us over to BioMaid. And it was like, but for that conference, we never would have had that conversation, able to sit around the table, talk in person. So just wanted to chime in on the direct connect to MHSRS, because that in person is just, it's hard to put into words how valuable that is. So just wanted to add that one thing, sorry.
Yeah, and I would say it doesn't happen overnight. There's a process that the G2G team takes you through in generating a white paper and understanding where they should be attacking this. And it was our second MHSRS show that we were at, that we had the poster. We were talking to a lot of folks. We knew kind of what we were doing at that point. And it takes a little effort to kind of get there, but it's well worth it from our perspective.
I wanted to also chime in a little bit on, the exact DoD angle. So I think Tim had alluded to this earlier, but I think that China component, the fact that so much, like pretty much all of the heparin that we're using in this country is made in China, is of grave concern to the DoD. You don't want to be, sourcing a vital drug that's, used hundreds of thousands of times daily, including in our military for a lot of, very common procedures, conventional uses, but also, for military specific, applications. Like, we were able to identify in a lot of these conversations that we've had with folks at MHSRS and other forums that, there's specific areas of following injury where there's, off-target clotting, DVT, VTE, things like that, where there's a need for a reliable, safe anticoagulant. And the fact that we're sourcing that from China, it's of grave detriment for our warfighters. And so that's a use case that we sort of identified, and we're able to work with a lot of key researchers at DoD research facilities, and we also met at MHSRS to sort of help build that collaboration. We're really able to position TIGA as a key linchpin in that effort there. So just wanted to add that.
And I would just add that it's for those biotech executives out there. It's a lot like pitching VCs. You start off with an investment thesis that you think will hit the target. And then you get feedback through the iterations that says, oh, actually, we need to modify this thesis into something different. And that was the iterative approach that we took with our presentations to the government as well, is that each time we presented, they said, that doesn't quite hit the mark with us, but this would. And then we would modify the presentation and the thesis for investment with the government until we got to a point where they said, this is exactly what we need to do.
In terms of, and you've already touched upon this a little bit, but in terms of like how the engagement goes with DoD, so what does that comprise? I know we accompanied you to MHSRS, but there's a lot of pre-work before that, right? There was a lot of calls, a lot of meetings. How did that go? Like, what can you speak to that a little bit? Just sort of the prep work and like what happened there, what happened after? I think a lot of folks would be interested.
Yeah, we became incredibly efficient at presenting the technology, and I think I got to the point where I could present it to a congressional or Senate office chief of staff in about 4 minutes. And we'd say, does that make sense? And they'd say, I totally get it. We need to get appropriations language on this right away. We're in. And by continuing to kind of present that and get that feedback, that was very helpful. We also presented at BARDA Tech Watch with about 50 attendees, including some of the folks. There was some overlap with some of the DoD folks that attended that, and we're also at MHSRS. The prep for MHSRS is you apply for, kind of figure out what it is that you think we can present on. We've created a poster describing the technology and how it would apply to the DoD. We presented that poster at MHSRS, had a lot of booth traffic kind of walking through and looking at that. And then the G2G team was kind of prepping folks ahead of that and saying, hey, look, we've got some people coming in. This is the technology. It's a presentation of information to them ahead of time that's very simple, so that everybody gets it. It doesn't get too technical, but it really applies it to to what they're doing. And by doing that prep work ahead of the meeting, that's kind of 2 months out that we're out right now on MHSRS, is really important to be able to get that message out. And then the meeting actually occurs, and then there's the follow-up afterwards with very specific, what we needed was very focused opportunities on where the funding was available to be able to go after it.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember your poster, it was focused not on your existing work, but it was focused on the component of aeromedical evacuation for the Air Force. So I remember that was the connection we drew for you guys there. And of course, the work that ended up happening between you and DoD, a lot of that was focused in the Air Force. I know just from experience from being at the table of those conversations, it sort of solidified the existing collaboration that you had going, but it also allowed you to build new ones as well. I know you put together an additional grant proposal for the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Program from that meeting. So none of that would have happened if you weren't able to interact with those program managers and researchers face to face, because they're really able to draw the connections from all these really disparate meetings that have been happening virtually overall over the course of a year, right? So just wanted to add that flavor.
Yeah, I can't emphasize enough the fact that the government is really a labyrinth of agencies that are all doing good work, but to navigate that is virtually impossible if you don't have people that know how it works.
Yep.
And so, as I said, we're very good at filing government grants. We had no idea that there of the hundreds of other areas within the government where there's funding that exists, and it's just a matter of making that connection.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of folks who are on the line right now who are probably where TIGA was, a couple of years back, who are interested in engaging with the government, particularly with the DoD. Well, what advice would you give them, Tim, in terms of at least from your experience? Like, how do you get started? What are some tips for success? What would you recommend being in the position that you are now after, having, gotten a lot of wins on the board, so to speak?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this earlier, but I'll emphasize it again, and that is that it's a process. We know that there is funding available, and I think that by going through a process of drafting a white paper and a path forward to help you understand what it is that we have for the government, and then be able to utilize that and plug into the right agencies. But it's also a matter of getting out there and presenting to a lot of different groups. And as I said, we were at ARPA-H and BARDA and congressional folks and specific research areas that we didn't even know about. And to be able to kind of plug into all those areas and take the time to talk with these folks and get to know them. And almost invariably, a meeting that you would have would lead to them saying, I'm not the person, but this person is the right person. And you have to then take that meeting as well. And once we decided we're going to dedicate ourselves to getting this done, we saw after about 6 months that things started happening. And we started making those connections, and people started getting to know who we were. We've spent time at MHSRS in person, meeting a lot of generals and folks that are running the DoD, but we also spent some time on Capitol Hill, meeting with folks, and that was really valuable too, because they actually do, the staff members of congressional and Senate offices actually do want to help you, and they're very smart and supportive. So it's been a very good experience.
Great. I think that rounds out our discussion. I think, yeah, your story is definitely one that's really shows how engaging with DoD can be so valuable, and a lot of people just sort of don't even know about it, and they don't appreciate how much medical innovation and research is going on through collaborations and through funding from DoD. So I think your company's example is really a shining star of how you can get from point A to point B, even if it's through a route that you weren't really considering before. So thanks again, Tim. Really appreciate all of your insights. And yeah, we look forward to continuing to work with you and seeing your successes from here on out. I'll turn it over to Greg very shortly, and we can move on to general Q&A.
Yeah, so yeah, Tim, stay on camera because some of these questions may pertain to you, and Liz, if you want to come on camera too to field some of these. But to your point, Aditya, we do have some questions that have come up that I've answered kind of behind the scenes and have let folks know. There were questions about the recording. Yes, the recording and the handouts will be available. Look for an email. Anybody who's registered will get an email next week with that link for the recording and access to the slides. Others had asked about specifically women's health. They didn't see that in the list initially. And is women's health really a priority, or should they interpret that as being that if it's not on the list, that it's not an area of opportunity? Liz, do you want to speak to that, given all the women's health work that we're plugged into?
Love the question. So women's health has not risen to the point at which there's a whole big focus on it within DoD. There is a research funding line that is for intramural research within DoD, and it is actually only $1 million, so it is pretty small. However, within the CDMRP program, Congressionally Directed Military Research Program, there are many different lines, and women's health can fit into all those lines, except prostate cancer. But for the most part, there can be women's health submissions in there. And I think we're at a time where they are open to those kinds of submissions in a way they previously haven't been. And then for the MHSRS in particular, there is always some dedicated time to women's health. And there's this group of nurses, physicians, within DoD working at military bases that have been collaborating, and then with the Uniformed Services University around advancing more women's health. So I feel like it is rising. And then even at the highest level, Shailene Mullen is very committed to women's health. So I feel like it's still evolving and growing, and we're hoping there'll be more funding and more opportunities in the future, but it's not like it's a huge space already. Coming to the conference, you will be able to find people though who are interested in collaborating. A lot of times at MHSRS, you can find the key people behind programming and opportunities for CRADAs or cooperative agreements, military transfers, MTAs, that then lead to funding opportunities. So not everything is going to be, $1 million in my hand at first. And as Tim was talking about, it's a nudging process. It's a lot of, building these relationships, educating, going back again and continuing to nudge. So a lot of that can happen at MHSRS by just seeking out the breakout sessions that cover some of these women's health issues.
I will also say, just to add some additional flavor on that, I mean, if you can somehow position your innovation as being, relevant to the female warfighter and military readiness, that's a key angle that you can use to sort of reframe your existing work so that it's relevant to the military. Because as everyone knows, women are an increasing percentage of the military by percentage and raw numbers. So that's one angle that you should really look at.
Yeah, great, Aditya. So I've got two questions here that kind of relate. And then, so let me kind of merge the two. So one of them is there media coverage at the conference? Generally not. and this particular participant is asking, you know, if we're not going, how can we understand what direction DoD is headed if we can't attend? And kind of related to that is it too late to engage usefully before this MHSRS? So Liz, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, or Aditya.
I don't think it's too late at all, by the way. They just finalized the dates. So you can definitely sign up, participate, and have a very effective conference experience. So you are not too late at all. I would say this, something that we do at G2G for our clients is we strategize contexts that we know to set up meetings during the coffees and the lunches. So I'd say for about 50%, we set them up ahead of time. And then the other 50%, we sort of divide and conquer these different breakout sessions and go up and talk to the speakers, the main contact for DoD. And so it's a combination of presets and then just going for it when you're at the conference, and you have plenty of time to do that kind of prep.
So someone else asked, is the DoD VA funding at this point in time really focused on life sciences, biotech, IT companies?
Sure. I'm not sure why there's like a negative feel to that question, but yeah, I mean, anything in life sciences that's going to help the warfighter, they are very interested in.
Cool. Any work with Department of Homeland Security, kind of stepping outside of DoD? So they're asking if G2G works with Department of Homeland Security.
Yes, we do. And you might be thinking that BARDA is in there, but BARDA used to be in there, but it was switched into HHS, Health and Human Services. So we do a ton with first response, that type of work. And then there's FEMA work. There's definitely a lot of different angles that are affecting the life sciences and helping with bringing life sciences innovation to market. So yes.
Gotcha. Okay. So we've got some general type of questions. When is the conference? It is August 26th through 9th. August 26th through the 29th, and it's in Kissimmee, Florida. And this will all be in the email that we send as a follow-up. And then somebody did put in a follow-up question. They meant, is it too late to engage with G2G before the conference? No, in actuality, this is like prime time, which is why we're doing this conference or this webinar now. And this gives plenty of lead time to coordinate with companies. We have represented companies. We've taken them with us, just like Tim we've done with Tim over the years, but we'll work specifically with companies to work this conference. And the sooner we have those conversations, the better, because we can prepare the materials with you as far as a white paper and start to target who will be there. And we are going to do a follow-up to this webinar in mid to late July as yet another kind of final prep and final push for making the most of the conference. So this question is for Tim. As a CEO of a small, what would you recommend to a small startup company who is, trying to figure their way out? They think they've got a technology that will apply to the DoD. What are kind of the top 3 things a CEO in a small startup should be thinking about to go down a similar path that you went down?
Yeah, so without knowing kind of what the science is, you need some validation of that science. Usually it's a scientific paper that's been published, something that you could take out and start to present to folks. If you're not quite VC ready, SBIR, STTR are fantastic programs. The phase 1 grants are about $400,000 nowadays. And it's relatively straightforward to get a phase 1 SBIR grant. And it really gives you an opportunity to see how the government kind of sees your technology and what you're trying to accomplish with that. SBIR phase 2 grants are really in the range of $2.5 million, and if it's a drug, it's money dedicated to kind of moving you toward the clinic. And there's wonderful opportunities right there to get started, and that's something that we became very adept at. But there's money that you need beyond that. Obviously, you've got patents costs, you've got facility costs, you've got costs for your folks. that you're hiring in, and you got to get that across that that valley of death that us small biotechs need to get across in order to get to be Series A phase, type of funding opportunity. So I would start with that. I would probably look at your opportunities to be able to find angel investors at that point that believe in the technology and want to help support it, and then move forward with a capital development plan. And I should say that as the incoming president and CEO of Biocom, which is the largest trade organization for biotech companies in the world with over 1,800 members, we have an exceptional policy group that focuses on working with Washington, D.C., and in our case, Sacramento, to help our groups with policy. We also have a fantastic capital development group that helps folks get in front of venture capital groups and pharma companies that might be interested in partnering. But there's a gap there. And that gap is all these other funding opportunities that exist within the government that you don't necessarily know about, even if you're really good at SBIR and STTR grants. And I think that G2G has done a really good, exceptional job of plugging that gap and providing the opportunity to say there's other funding sources out there within the government, and it's not part of your cap dev program that you might be plugged into with your state bio organization, and it might not be part of the policy group either, because that's really a different area to be involved with. But there's money in Washington, D.C., in the federal government that's available for you.
Great. I'm just kind of looking at the time. I think we have a couple other slides to get through and want to be cognizant of the time. And unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get to every single question. We really appreciate everyone's participation. And if we didn't have time to answer your question, I'll put in the chat here ways to reach out to Aditya, Liz, and myself if you want to ask your question offline. We're happy to set up other time with you individually. So with that, Aditya, do you want to go ahead and put the slides back up? Because I think we have some parting words and tips that Liz is going to go through, and possibly even a case study.
Do you want me to do the final tips?
Yes, yeah, go for it.
Alrighty. So your final takeaways, you want to make sure that you're tracking the funding opportunities and these conferences that we've been talking about. The GBG reporting service is a great resource for you. And if you're a member of some of those bio organizations that we mentioned earlier, Midwest, Virginia Bio, etc., then this comes with your membership. So you should definitely utilize it. And then we give those insights once a month. So that's like a kind of cheat sheet way to track the grants. Otherwise, it's a nightmare going in to search for grants.gov yourself. It produces way too many results for keywords. Second, you want to write these white papers in a really effective, succinct way that you're quickly covering problem, solution, results. Your unique solution is what's key. I'm regularly asked by program managers, is it truly novel? So that's important. And when you describe the problem, it's got to be about the military. It cannot be general population. You want to tailor, and even for veterans, you want to tailor to veterans. So just make sure that you are resonating with your target audience. You want to understand the program goals, the intent of the award, and the criteria. So within CDMRP, for example, there's like an idea award versus development awards. So just make sure that you're fitting into the right category. And you're reading those directions, follow those directions. I had an NSF reviewer from NSF tell me that half the proposals they were reviewing ended up in the trash because people just didn't even follow directions. So you do not want to be one of those examples. Talk to program managers. That's what we were talking about today. You've got to develop these relationships. Come to MHSRS. That is how you're going to develop those relationships. It's really key. Follow the deadlines, budget guidelines, all those things are obviously key when you're making a submission. Make sure you've got the basics down, like the SAM.gov, all these little registration things that you need to do just to make sure that you can make the submission. Get that done weeks ahead of time. Do not wait until the last minute because it will be a nightmare. Note that there are these pre-applications, quad charts that are used for DoD that are totally distinctive from NIH, NSF, all the others. And this two-pronged approach, the program managers are reviewing those initial, 3 to 4 page submissions on whether or not they get down selected for a full submission. So again, that's why those relationships are so key. And it's truly different than all the others where they have to send it out for independent reviewers at that stage. So that two-pronged approach really opens a door for us when we're trying to access funding. You can check the grant reviewers and past awards on the CDMRP website. That's a great resource. You want to remember who decides. I touched on that a little bit as far as the DoD two-pronged approach, but also on the congressional side. So a great case study, there was no completely non-existent rare cancer research line within Department of Defense. And we lobbied like crazy. We brought in survivors, we brought in physicians, and we talked to many members of Congress. We hit every single member of the Defense Subcommittee, House and Senate, and then the overall chair and ranking of the full appropriations committee. We talked to several others actually touched by cancer and explained the disproportionate impact of rare cancers and those who serve in the military, which is actually 66% of the cancers that our military service members have are rare. So there is that connection, and yet there was no funding line for it. So we created it, and we've been able to fund it every year since then. So there are really great ways to engage in government at the agency level, as well as the congressional level and White House, to truly create funding lines, shape the direction of funding. Just remember your voice is really important in that. So there's consortia, there's broad agency announcements. I think a lot of people are familiar with MTech and some of these others. Those can be great. MTech in particular, I know better. We've done more with them over the years, and you can look into opportunities. You can even apply. You don't actually have to join until you're awarded, and you obviously want to draw down the funds. So that can be really helpful. I mentioned CRADAs and MTAs earlier. So there are ways to collaborate with the military without getting funding, but can lead to funding. So keep that in mind. Same with pilot projects with the VAs or VAMCs. If you get good data, that gives you the foundation to build relationships and sales opportunities across the VAs. Be persistent, build those relationships, and align with the opportunities. Do not promote oranges if all they want are apples, right? Just really make sure that it's aligned so that you're maximizing your time in engaging with government. And I think that's it for our final tips and case study. Yeah. And I think we're just at time. So we're going to wrap this up. I'm not seeing other questions pop up. So thank you so much for dialing in today. We hope this was really helpful. We hope to see you at MHSRS. Our emails are there. Email us if you have questions. And hope you have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much.